Wonderful. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I just want to say welcome, Facebook family. And if you've been tuning in here with us for the last few minutes, we've had the pleasure of catching up with Pastor Pete from Crosswalk Church. And I'm Kim, and this is Pricked. And we absolutely, for the last few minutes, love having you guys on board. With Pastor Pete from Crosswalk Church. I can't listen to myself talk.
I can hear me just fine.
And Pastor Pete, you're going to have to tell us. I'm moving the microphone closer to Kevin. I have a tendency to project, and he does not. And so that's some of the feedback we received in the past. So we want to be sure everyone can hear Kevin because he has some very poignant things to say.
Yeah.
So,
or pointed.
Pointed. So again, yes, because we're talking about being pricked. So the whole idea behind the concept of being pricked is that at some time or another, all of us in our lives have been pricked. And I say I've pricked lots of people because I've been a nurse for 35 years and I have started a plethora of IVs and given shots and done lab draws and I was preparing a submission for a TED Talk, and I even said enemas are a prick, which I think some people would agree that that's a prick.
I would tend to agree, but...
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm a nurse, so I can talk about those kinds of things, tongue in cheek. I can always be on that bleeding edge for the book. And everything that we talk about will most likely stick with you. Okay, so that's it for my 5 parts.
Oh no, you skipped right over one tongue in cheek.
Oh, that's bad stuff.
Throughout the conversation, we definitely want to just continue to insert those funny because we can find humor in just about everything.
Yes.
So, Kevin, this is my esteemed partner in crime. Kevin.
Hello, I'm Kevin Bowen, and I started off saying I'm along for the ride, but this is becoming very near and dear to my heart. I love this topic, overcoming pricks, and.
And that's a prick too, because you can't be saying on the title. No, the title is pricked, Kevin, but it's how you respond to it.
How you respond.
That's right.
Yeah. So Kim and I have known each other for, it seems like forever, but not quite, since 8 years old. We have just kind of stayed in touch. I've moved into the I went into the hospitality industry, primarily food service. And when Kim and I were talking about when we started talking about this, it hit home immediately. I don't necessarily stick needles in people as my prick, but I've certainly pricked some people, and I've been pricked by individuals. And so, yeah, I get it, and it's something that I would love to talk about and share, and hopefully help others overcome. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And, another part of the whole idea behind the concept is right now in its current state, we have so many massive pricks that are happening to us, right? So, we have economic downturn, which is impacting, pricking people constantly. And then we have global warming and these wildfires up and down the state. And now friends on the East Coast saying they're being affected by our smoke because of the way the wind blows.
Yeah.
And then, there is social injustice and, of course, systemic racism. And on top of that, the pandemic. So we're all in this space of crisis and trauma. And what we can gain from that is, one, solidarity, coming together as community and really sharing how we're all encountering this strife. But on top of that, how we are overcoming it. What are we doing to respond to it? How are we reacting to those pricks? And what can we share so that other people can react similarly? Wow, I've never been tongue-tied over that word before. And come out of it on the other side with a little more positivity or, and a little more support. So I don't know what you think about that.
I I think that's very deep, but I think it's time to introduce our guest.
I think it's time to introduce our guest too. And I'm going to let you have the honor because he's a dear friend of yours. And I know you've been doing some research.
I've been doing a little studying, prepping for our guest. So I will I'll give you the name and title, but Pete, I'm going to ask you to just kind of talk about who you are, what you've been doing. I know Pete as I've been attending Crosswalk Community Church. Actually, when I started, it was First Baptist Church of Napa, but Crosswalk Community Church since 2007. And Pastor Peter Shaw was and has been the head pastor. Not head pastor, senior pastor. Thank you, senior pastor, for just over 25 years. Is that correct, Pete?
You don't look old enough that.
20 years.
Oh, 20 years. Oh, no, sorry. I was close. And I'll tell you what impressed me in those early days. So I had attended for a couple of weeks, and it was about the third week of attendance, and my pastor walks out on stage wearing blue jeans, no shoes, and a one.org t-shirt, and I said, I'm sold. This is my church. So, Pete, if you'd like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself. Is
Sure.
Reverend Doctor, am I getting it right this time?
Reverend Doctor, that's right.
Reverend Dr. Peter R.
It's only when I want a reservation at a good restaurant. Or intimidate somebody. That's that usually.
Yes.
Well, I've been, like you said, at Crosswalk for 20 years, and it's been really an incredible ride, one that I didn't plan on the way that it turned out. The church was in a real struggle when I came. It was almost dead. They were deciding whether or not to keep the doors open or join forces with another church. It was in tough shape. They'd gone through in the previous 10 years before I arrived, two major catastrophic type in-house events that just decimated the place. And what we were left with, this is going back to like 1996, 97, is those faithful few that had been there for decades. And they took a huge risk. The average age at that time was 70 years old in the church, and they took a huge risk at bringing me out. I was 29 years old, and they asked me to do whatever it took to try to keep it going and bring some life back into it and all that. And at that time, I was a pastor in northern Illinois, about 100 miles out of Chicago, and it had some success turn a church around that had been pretty flat for a long time. And that got the attention of some people. So that's how we got together. And the unfortunate / fortunate thing is I was so arrogant that when I heard about what I was being asked to do, I didn't give it a second thought. I mean, there was some God stuff in there too. It really felt like this is what we were supposed to do. But honestly, I came in just, I can do this, no problem, whatever. And the good thing about that is it made me overlook a lot of the challenges that were before me, because I was too stupid to notice or too arrogant to notice. So I came in and I just started doing what I thought I needed to do, and talk about pricked. Well, I was the prick for sure for a long time, and people let me know about it. So for sure, in the first 4 or 5 years were absolute hell. It was uphill the whole time. If I could go back and redo a lot of things, I would for sure. But the beautiful thing is those faithful folks stayed faithful really the whole way through, and saw and supported me with decisions that they didn't understand. And some of them worked, some of them were total flops. It was just a crazy, crazy ride, but then things started to level out and smooth out. And then we got to a place of stability where we could just really ask the question, what are we called to do in Napa? And when we started asking that question, lo and behold, opportunities came our way to say yes. And a lot of that started with recovery, where, you know, we had maybe one or two, and they would ask us, as there's a noon group that is a very large AA group, and they outgrew the space that they were in, and they asked us, you know, could we use your sanctuary? And Dar, our executive pastor, she and I talked about it, and all the old church tapes, you know, and both of our heads started going off about, oh, this is sacred space and what's going to happen and all that. And then we both stopped, like within 5 seconds, just said, this is ridiculous. Of course they can use it. And so, you know, we just started saying yes and yes and yes. And now we've got, I think, 43 groups that call Crosswalk home, all related to recovery. Of course, they're off campus now because of COVID, but we're looking to get them back on actually pretty soon. So that's been an example, just one thing after the next. The evacuation stuff, of course, is a part of it. But it's been a crazy ride. And naturally, as I mentioned, I've been the prick that people have to work through their forgiveness issues with, for sure. But, you know, sometimes, you know, our church has been evolving for 20 years, and we're at a great place right now, a very healthy, stable place, growing in our capacity to serve the community, which is great. But along all those years, we've always had people leave, and sometimes they do it gracefully, and sometimes they don't. And so I've been pricked many times as people take shots on the way out. Had some bigger issues that by taking a stand for equality and equity carried a heavy price on me personally and on the church. And those were big prickly moments for sure that we've had to work through. But I love the premise of your show, because if there's one thing that is always popular in terms of what I teach on, which always gets traction, it has to do with forgiveness issues, which at the end of the day, that is a response to being pricked by somebody, something in life. So this is very, very apropos. And I don't think your show's ever going to get tired, because, you know, I'm actually going to do a forgiveness series probably at the beginning of the new year, because it's so needed. And literally every time I do a series that's related to this stuff at all, it always resonates with people because it is such a deeply human experience. So anyway, just delighted to be here, and I really appreciate the opportunity to join you.
Well, yeah. I need to put you on the spot, because there's two stories I'm hoping that you're willing to share with us.
Sure.
One is about that very top, I don't want to say too much, but about that prick you were just talking about
equity and equality.
Equity and equality.
Mm-hmm.
And also there's a story from your past about a car crash.
Okay. Yeah.
That seems like a pricked moment to me.
Yeah, I never thought about it as a pricked moment, but oh yeah, I know what part you're talking about. Yeah, it was pretty minor. I mean, the car crash wasn't, but the the pricked part was pretty funny. Yeah, I can talk about that. I'll talk about that one first, because that was pretty minor. Well, minor in my world, if this is what you're talking about. I think it is. So back in 2000, I got this little red sports car, and it was Holy Week, which is in pastor's world, that's also Hell Week, because we have so much to prepare for, and it's just a very, very intense time. And I'm a singer, and so I was a guest soloist with a big mass adult choir up at PUC, and I went up there for a rehearsal early in the week of Holy Week. I think it was Monday night or something like that. And I'm new to the community. I don't know a whole lot about PUC or their background. I know they're Seventh-day Adventists, but didn't know a lot about some of their traditions and so forth. So after rehearsal, I was pretty tired and thought I would just, drive around Angwin, looking for a place where I could buy a Coke, which I might as well have been looking for a Starbucks up there, right? I mean, at that time, I was told by friends who worked up there, there was one pop machine, Coke machine, that was in a secret location where real Coke with caffeine in it was mislabeled so that you could actually get a real Coke if you wanted one. Well, I didn't know any of this. So I started driving down the road, and it was kind of rainy, and didn't know where I was going. I ended up going down Pope Valley Road thinking maybe there'd be more. There was not going to be any more. Anyway, long story short, I turn around to come back, and coming back, and a deer comes into my path. I overreacted. I didn't do the right thing. I tried to avoid the deer. And in one of these roads, I flipped my car. And I was terrified because I'm upside down. The sunroof broke out, and my head's dragging along the cement. And now I'm bleeding, and I'm seeing all this happen. I'm actually terrified because I'm worried that, somebody's going to come hauling around too fast in a pickup or something and just wipe me out. And lo and behold, a truck did come coming around the corner, and luckily they slowed down, stopped. Turns out it was an off-duty EMT, which was a really cool thing. He helps get me out of the car, calls for help, and he's putting pressure on my head while we're at the side of the road waiting for an ambulance to come get me. There's some other cool parts about that story too, but the goofy part, the prickly part, was Maundy Thursday, which is the Thursday of Holy Week, where you celebrate communion and washing of feet, that kind of thing. It was the Last Supper that Jesus celebrated with his disciples. And so we go through the service, and a gal comes up to me afterwards, and I'm still bandaged, right? I've got this, I got a whole bunch of staples in my head, and my bell's still a little bit rung, but I felt good enough to lead the service and didn't want to miss out or have anybody else miss out. So this woman comes up to me after service, and she hears about the wreck and all that, and she just looks at me and says, "God must have really wanted to get your attention to cause that wreck." And I was like, that's just such a compassionate thing to say. That's, oh my goodness. But that kind of thing, that's just been a part of my life as a pastor. It's not all pastors get it, maybe as much as I do, but I do, and I think it's because in this case I just got in a wreck. I don't think God was behind that at all, although I'm absolutely certain God worked around it. But at other times when I've taken stands for different things, and I'll get to the one that you were interested in. But I've taken a lot of heat for saying things that are that break with tradition, but I think are actually true to the tradition of the original Jesus, because he was a renegade. My teaching last week, I took a spotlight on some verses that are super familiar with people, but because of translation issues and not appreciation of context issues, they're lost on white guys like me, and we just think they're statements about how to be a nice person, when really Jesus is talking about how to do nonviolent resistance in the face of an oppressor. It's fascinating stuff. That's who he was. He was a renegade. He didn't get killed by the Roman government for being too nice of a person. He knew that he was drawing attention to massive issues of oppression in his day. And that's what ended up getting him in a lot of trouble. And that's a part of my story too. So there have been times when I've made very clear stands for gender equality. And that caused some people to leave the church because of their own issues and not wanting to see what's right in front of their noses, right there in the Bible, that Jesus was egalitarian. And so was the Apostle Paul. He's the one that gets quoted the most for keeping women silent in the church. But at the very time he's writing those very specific contextualized verses, he's totally fine having a woman pastor a church he started up in Philippi. So if you don't read contextually and understand the fullness of the picture, is totally lost. And so just bringing that up and recognizing that, women were treated as equally as they could be in the first century. That's an important realization, because they were not equal societally anywhere near what we have today. But the Whopper had to do with LGBTQ equity and equality. And when I first taught about it, how I understood the texts, there are only 7 texts in the whole Bible that talk about homosexuality, only 7, right? And when I taught about it the very first time, it was right after Obama got elected. And I couldn't talk about it leading up to the election because it was too hot of an issue. Prop 8 was on the line, and it was crazy hot, kind of like now in some respects. But it was so intense. And I taught about it and really didn't get much feedback at all, which I couldn't believe. I taught about it again several years later, and this one made some noise. This one, I came out in no uncertain terms. I think I was trying to be a little too academic about it in 2009, but when I redid it, I ended basically saying that I don't think God has any problem with same gender covenantal marriage. I don't think the verses that are in the Bible, all 7 of them, I don't think they're talking about what we're talking about today. They talked about very, very different things back in history. And so when I did that, I was on staff for our region within American Baptist churches, leading small groups of pastors and organizing small groups for pastor support and all that all over Northern California. And because we're Baptists are kind of a peculiar people because we're ultimately not top down. Every church can call their own shots. And that's what kept me on staff. So I had a lot of people that wanted, my head to be gone and to be fired from the staff. But the executive said, he's actually exercising his right to lead his church as he sees fit, and he's held accountable by his own board and all that. So there's really not an issue here. And so the executive at that time just said, hey, don't push this as an agenda item within the region. Keep doing your work. You're doing a good job. And let's just move forward. So I was like, well, okay. And just kind of looked at it as being present in the room itself, knowing that everybody knew where I stood was going to hopefully have some kind of an impact, at least to see that somebody that they liked and got along with and somewhat respected at least saw things differently and didn't come down on it the same way and was leading a church that was still vital, having that belief. And so where it really hit the fan was a few years ago. A couple who came in first as friends, a gay couple, turned into more than a friendship. They came to our church because they heard that we were open and affirming, which is church speak for we're cool with LGBTQ equality and equity. And they're truly welcome in our church in every possible way, not welcome with a wink. Most churches are welcoming with a wink, which means you're welcome to come, but once you get to a certain level in the system, you're going to find out you're not so welcome anymore unless you renounce your whole lifestyle and who you are. And that's not who Crosswalk is. So anyway, they camped out with us for several months. They fell in love. They joined the church, went through our process. That was one thing that helped one of the guys understand the welcome with a wink principle, as they were with a church they deeply loved and were experiencing good things until they wanted to become a member and were pulled aside by a pastor to say, you can't, which is tragic. So anyway, long story short, they get engaged. They want to get married by their pastor at their church. And of course, that's something I wanted to do, but it was also a big decision for our church. So our board talked it over and came to a decision. And part of the thing we were weighing, it was kind of a no-brainer on one level, but we recognized the gravity of the decision on the institutional side. It was complex because we knew that it was most likely going to cause problems in our denominational relationship, and it did. So as soon as we made the decision, I let my executive minister know, who is a friend of mine, and still is a friend of mine, know what I was going to do, gave him a heads up, and he pretty much immediately let me know that I was fired after about 20 years of service. And not only fired, because the decision to marry, that was the deal breaker for the region and in those terms. And so it was a clear shot at the region. But not only was I fired, but was strongly encouraged to do what I needed to do to pull our church out of relationship with the entire region. And if I didn't, he would take measures to make sure that we were kicked out of the region. So that was not terribly surprising, but very prickly because of the way it went down. And I think it could have been much worse. I have predecessors, colleagues that experienced much worse, but it could have been handled in a much different way, and that was disappointing. And it led to some other disappointing things with a guy we had in our church, a member who wanted to get ordained, and he was in the final stages of that and needed to go before this region's ordination committee. And I was asked to pull the plug on that because of his association with Crosswalk, that maybe they couldn't do it. And it was just this whole mess. And that part all worked out fine, but very prickly and extremely painful, because as soon as that all happened, it's just like, I lost 100 friends. Just like that, and lost a lot that I'd worked for, which was part of my identity. I was proud of the work that I did, and it was all like it didn't matter. And and that was just really hard. It can sound really prideful, and I don't mean it to be, but there's a healthy pride in work too. And it's like, when I crossed the 20-year line with Crosswalk, it was a cause for celebration. And there was nothing, after 2 decades of work, working with pastors, it was just, and he was fired, so that was hard. So I think those are the 2 stories you're thinking about, Kevin, and that's part of my life and part of what I've been about.
So you're hitting home on exactly what this conversation is about, yes. Right? That we all experience pain, and we all experience pride and shame, right? We all take pride in what we do, especially if it is aligned with our purpose and our passion. And when it feels as if someone has taken that from us, then that feels like we've been pricked. And the reality is, we all know that we own parts of it, right? It's our own actions and understanding of consequences, choices, decisions, and consequences, right? We all know that. And yet when it's someone else who is making a decision that affects us, it feels, again, like we've been pricked, and that we don't have the power to make it right or to respond to it. So then my question to you, Pastor Pete, is how did you react? How did you respond to it? What did that stimulus, pain or otherwise, what did it encourage you to do?
Well, I'm deeply human, so I didn't handle it as healthy as I could. I think I handled it. Well, I'll take that back. I think I handled it about as healthy as I could at the moment. But the reality is, when this kind of stuff happens, it's painful. And as much as I wanted to respond with as much grace as possible, I'm sure there were ways that I could have toned it down. And I'm not even, even now I'm kind of in retrospect, I'm wondering, well, why? Is that really appropriate? Was there, because it's not like I came out swinging and was like, okay, I'm just going to trash you on social media and blah, blah. Not like I did that, but I love I love what you're getting at, which is, are we reacting or responding? And I wanted to respond in a way that honored grace, honored justice, honored where we were as a church and who I am as a person and as the pastor of the church. So, I told the story of what happened in church a few weeks after it went down. And and it caused its own little flurry. I mean, I think I pretty much told it straight up exactly how it went down. I don't think I embellished a whole lot. I really don't think I did. But sometimes just telling the truth of what happened itself causes a lot of reaction, because then the other side is kind of called out in that. So I don't think I was, I don't think I made a whole lot of error in that, but I'm sure that I was not unwounded, and I'm sure that I acted at times wounded. And I think that's part of the process, and it's what when I talk to people about this stuff, especially if they're beating themselves up for how they're struggling. It's just like, you just got the crap kicked out of you. Give yourself a break. And particularly because Christians are so fast to demand forgiveness. And unfortunately, in racial issues, horrifically so. Just, guys who look like me are saying to, an entire race of people, why don't you just forgive and forget? Like, it's just like, okay, sure. Why didn't we think of that? You know what I mean? Just crazy. And
Yes.
I've seen it where, forgiveness is a process. You don't get, if you get there too fast, I question it. And if you say you've arrived and it's done and it's over, I question that, because at least in my experience, from the things that have hurt me the most, they're not one and done statements. But we got to work through all of the emotions of pain and suffering and loss that are involved in the prick event. And we may get to that place of forgiveness sooner than later. And honestly, I'm sure you guys have addressed this, but forgiveness really has very little to do with the prick.
Right.
The forgiveness is almost entirely about the person who got pricked and their freedom to not hold the weight of that anger and the judgment and the hatred toward that other person. It frees us from that. And it works, and it's worth going after. It's worth pursuing. It is not devoid of justice. It holds justice and mercy and balance, but it's a process. And I know that there are moments that I'll be reminded of what's happened to me in the whopper stories of my life that will take me right back to it. And
Yes.
it's a new opportunity to see it again from a new angle, learn from it, go deeper with it, let the pain inform me and teach me. And as much as I'm able in a process, get to that place of forgiveness and freedom all over again. So that way I'm no longer shackled by the prick, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I absolutely love that, because, I actually have been recently having this same conversation. So a couple of points that resonate with me are that, you have to let the pain inform you and teach you. And that's absolutely right. So the question is, what did you learn from that event that you just went through? And also for me, when I'm looking at forgiveness, there's an individual that comes immediately to mind, and I've been beating myself up because it's been taking so long for me to get to that place of forgiveness. And of course, like you said, it doesn't harm the other person in any way, shape, or form. They have no idea what you're struggling with, or that you have this anger. It's only taking energy from you. And so it's really about sitting back and saying, what is it that I'm supposed to learn from this event? What is that information? How is this event that's happened informing me? What did I learn from it? How can I apply that and move forward? Because what I have realized is, until you've learned that lesson, about whatever it is that has transpired, there is no way that you can forgive that individual. If you're still just full of this anger and you can't see the forest through the trees, so to speak, or you can't see the blackness or the redness, the blindness that occurs when you're so angry, you just can't move forward. And you do have to give yourself the grace and the understanding that it will take time to process those feelings and get that true meaning before you can apply it and release it, so to speak. And you're absolutely spot on when it comes to, it only takes a little something to trigger you, to bring you right back, and those feelings to come back up. And again, it's about giving yourself the grace to say, that thing, whatever happened, that event was very poignant in my life, and it created an entire change of circumstance that I wasn't necessarily ready for, and or I was ready for it. I kind of released it to the universe and brought it on myself, and yet I didn't understand the gravity of the consequence of what I was releasing to the universe. So pretty remarkable, and I could go on and on and on. Yeah, I think you have something to say. Yes.
I do, but there are new topics. So please.
Oh, so are mine. I mean, actually, a lot of what you were saying about finding your voice. So this, for some reason, this week is a common theme for me: finding your voice. So I am very open to listening to lots of people's opinions and perspectives on life and the world. And I recently had an energy reading, if you know what that is, person who understands the chakras within the body. It relates to Eastern philosophy. And they were talking with me about, she's starting a new business, so I wanted to support her in that. So she did an energy reading for me, and she said that I have a blockage in my throat chakra. And what that is relating to is I am at this place where I am becoming more comfortable, yet not fully there, with speaking my truth. And I wrote down 3 times while you were talking, finding your voice and speaking your truth. So this is a common theme this week. And so she told me I'm wearing a necklace that has a little bit of lapis in it, because she told me that lapis, in the philosophy that she subscribes to, is something that helps you find your inner truth, and it clears the path for you to be able to speak your truth. So it's just interesting how whichever higher power you subscribe to works in those ways that bring you the information and the lesson that you need in the moment that you need it. And that's also part of being pricked. It's like when something is happening to you, it's something that is really poignant for you in that moment. It's a moment in time that opens doors for growth or opportunity or whatever. It's something that is, I'll, put myself out there and say it's something that you need in that moment, whether you recognize it or not.
I think that's really good. And it's related to pain and forgiveness and how we respond to being pricked. So there's an ancient, well, actually he's not so ancient. He was only 60 years ago now. His name was Thomas Merton. He was a Catholic monk. And he coined the term true self. And that's an ancient concept, but the idea is that we have, all of us, a true self, who we were really created to be, which is sort of us at our best, at our most mature, most whole, most well. And we all have this capacity. And the beauty of it is, and my tradition, I believe, Spirit of God, creator, ground of being, resides within absolutely every person. And yet, the creation story says, and it's a story, it's a myth, but it's a Jewish poem that says that when God created humanity, he looked at male and female both and said, now that's very good. So we have this positive origin story, not a negative story about what God sees us. And that continues all throughout the Bible. It's a good news story from the very beginning. And even when we blow it, we have struggle, or God still comes back and welcomes us back. But we all have the same spirit, and yet we have our genetic code, which makes everybody absolutely unique. There's never going to be anybody like us. There has never been anybody like us. And that needs to be really celebrated. I mean, talk about a self-esteem point. I mean, there's nobody like any other person in the world, which is great. But sometimes, all the time, we are brought up by human parents. And as human parents go, they're going to act very human at times. Now, I grew up, I was very lucky because I grew up with pretty healthy parents. But I can tell you that even with healthy parents, I had to work through a ton of stuff that I brought on, stuff that I don't even think they intended to bring on, but it was there, baggage for me to work through. And in those processing moments of my experience of being pricked in different ways, those are opportunities for me to grow deeper, more mature, to go on a discovery tour of my true self and who am I after, and those forgiveness issues, those prick points, so to speak, they give us a lens to see ourselves more fully and deeply. And so pain at that point, there's an author I love, Richard Rohr. He has a book called Everything Belongs. And that's the primary thrust. He says, let the pain be there. It's a part of your story. The question is, what are you going to do with it to maximize its impact in your life so that you grow from it and flourish because of it, instead of pretending it's not there, ignoring it, denying it, and really have it weigh you down and keep you from being who you are in your life. So yeah, good stuff. Well, really good stuff.
Well, and isn't it true that when you give voice to those things that cause you strife or pain, it lightens the load? It's as if, so for me, I believe in the energy that you put out and that I put out and that you put out and that whatever higher power you believe in puts out. And isn't it true that when you release that which is inside you, that is that angst or whatever you're struggling with, then there is tons of energy that helps remove that and shares that burden with you and fills you up with the sense of, I'm not alone. Others have encountered this in the past, and now I know that other people have survived, and so can I. Like, it fills you with hope. And everybody who knows me knows that I always say hope is not a plan. You know, it's eternal, it's essential, but it's not a plan, it's not a strategy. So create your plan, create your strategy. But the notion of hope, the notion of I can see the light, you know, through this darkness is pretty powerful. And it's all wrapped around that energy that you can at any time tap into.
And I think that this concept, this topic, this movement that we're creating, is really about that. You know, it's about being able to find someone who can help you with something that you're going through, something you're struggling with, because there are people who have had that struggle, right, or some similar instance that's relatable, that we can help guide someone else through.
Exactly right. And it's all about teaching people as well the skills for being able to respond. So everything that you just said, Pastor Pete, about give yourself the grace, understand that it takes time when you've been pricked, understand that you're going to experience emotions of anger and frustration and depression, and, you know, just understand that's natural, that's human, and don't beat yourself up over it. And even me, I mean, I talk about this kind of stuff, and I've been immersed in these types of conversations for a long time, but when it happened to me, you know, recently, it still affected me like that, and I beat my own self up over, why can't I just move through this? What is stopping me from, I cognitively know what lesson I learned and how, you know, I can apply it moving forward, but it's still that human experience of, I trusted someone and they did me wrong. Yeah.
One way of thinking about it that somebody shared with me is, forgiveness issues, prick issues, are like going up a mountain. And when we're at the base of the mountain in the early stages, we see it one way from one vantage point. And then as we circle up a little higher, we come back to that thing, something triggers us. And of course, these things are going to trigger us because our lives have mega themes. And given our personality types and so forth, we're going to experience similar things, similar realities. It's like up a little higher, we've got an opportunity to learn a little bit more about ourselves and how this works. And we go process through it and we come at a similar issue. And each time we get a little bit higher with greater perspective, we can see a little bit further, know a little bit more about ourselves. And that's good stuff. The painful stuff for me is, when I've been the prick and forgiving myself for being a prick. That's hard work. I tend to be a lot more forgiving with others than I am myself.
Yes.
And that's the harder stuff, is letting go of releasing myself from my own imprisonment. That's hard work, because the people that naturally, this is how it goes, but the people that we love the most are the ones that we're more likely to hurt the most because of proximity and time and all that. And that breaks my heart, that there have been times in my life when I've been a total prick to the people that I love the most. And that's hard stuff to get over. And still grieves me, to this day, even though I think I've been a pretty good guy and a pretty good dad and a pretty good husband. I'm still a human being, and I'm going to be a prick now and then.
Yeah, we all encounter those times. And actually, I was, again, sharing with Kevin that I was, practicing for a TED Talk submission. And I said exactly that. I have been a prick. I have been a prick on multiple occasions, and not just tongue in cheek about starting IVs and those kinds of things, but in a leadership role, people are going to perceive you, even if your intention is to not be a prick, people will sometimes perceive you as a prick because they perceive you in a position of authority. And, also in your family relationships, like you were saying, or your close relationships, where you do something with the intention of it being positive, or even if you do something with the intention of, hey, you need to wake up, it can be perceived as a prick as well. And to understand that we all have that capability. We all have the capacity to be pricks. And it's true what you say about it's even more difficult for us individually to forgive ourselves. We are our own worst critics. I mean, as a leader in healthcare, I used to, when something happened and I bring someone in and I say, okay, explain to me what happened. And they just go on and on and on about what happened and what they're going to do about it. And they were harder on themselves than I could ever be on them, because we hold ourselves so highly, most of us hold ourselves so highly accountable. And when I'm working with friends and loved ones who are being so hard on themselves, I say, tell me what you would tell your best friend. And they immediately soften and support and guide. And then I say, that's what you need to say to yourself as well.
Yep.
Because you're the only person that can hear that. Because we can tell you that till the cows come home. And same people have said those kinds of things to me. And I'm like, I hear you. But the reality is I'm still being a prick to myself.
It's hard work.
It's very hard work.
Yeah.
You have other topics. Do you want to jump in there?
Do.
I do want to ask my question at some
go,
point.
please. Yeah.
No. I've been yakking.
Oh.
You go.
So, well, So Pete, mine's kind of a big departure. It's talking about your current series, Go Be Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay. So about the, as you call it, Jesus's campaign speech. For those who don't know, Crosswalk Community Church here in Napa, our ethos is walk with God, walk with others, go be Jesus. Also another huge reason that I've been such a fan of what Pete, what you and the community have been doing in the community. It's not just about delivering a message on Sunday. It's about really getting out there and taking care of our community and the greater community, and being. I believe you explained that that's why one of the reasons why you wanted to move from Baptist church to community church, so it would be more inclusive.
Yep.
Am I saying that right? Okay.
Yeah. That's
So
right.
yeah. So on this whole this teaching series, you're talking about uh, the Constitution says that all people are equal, when in reality, and I'm paraphrasing greatly, sorry, when in reality, the truth is that some people are more equal than others. You went on to say, I don't know if it was in the same week or the following week, you were talking about yourself as a white guy from northern Germany, and how you recognize the privilege that gives you, and you equated that to Jesus in his day, how he would have been more like the people in the crowd of Black Lives Matter, behind the line, either there or you also compared him to possibly an undocumented immigrant, being that low on the totem pole, shall we say. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because one of the things we talk about on Pricked is gender equality, institutional racism, and I'd like to flesh that out a little bit with you.
And equity.
And equity.
Yep. So a couple things. I think there is a movement in the United States that wants to be constitutional, like it was in the beginning of our country, which means that all white men are equal who own property. Everybody can vote who owns property. And we have a freedom of religion, which basically only means that if you are a Protestant Christian, you are free to worship how you please in the United States, among other things. But that is our country's origin. And unless we're really honest about how racism was a part of the fabric of our country at the very beginning, and long before the Constitution started, of course, we're never really going to get there or get any further afield on this thing. And for lots of reasons, we haven't wanted to have that conversation. And I'm listening to a book right now, reading and listening to a book called These Truths by a Harvard history professor. And she chronicles just in great detail how our forefathers and our country established the kind of slavery that we did, when that kind of slavery that we instituted was unprecedented in global history. The kind that we commercialized to the degree that we didn't exist anywhere in time. And that even at that time, the country that we were leaving, the UK, looked at it and they were like, we can't make sense of this. And yet we figured out a way, we rationalized a way because of money. We figured out a way to rationalize it so that we could institutionalize slavery in America that allowed us really the financial means to be able to go forward and become our own nation. And that has stuck with us all the way until now. And last Sunday, this is the teaching you're referring to, is not only do I think Jesus would identify with Black Lives Matter, I think he'd be leading it because he was all about nonviolent resistance. And I mentioned in this teaching, I don't hear anybody and the major political candidates, because this somehow gets mixed up, and I don't know how this is happening, but I don't hear either political candidates saying that we want more violence and rioting and looting and all that. Nobody's saying that. Nobody credible anyway, that anybody takes seriously. But the idea of nonviolent resistance, Jesus was all about that. I mean, we forget that Jesus was brown. Yeah, I'm gonna put that on our Facebook page here. Late breaking news. He was brown. And he was dirt poor. It's questionable, what level of education he had. He was referred to as rabbi, but in his day and age, there's some problems with that. Like maybe the title was given to him posthumously, because that was done back in that day and age. And he was wise. He definitely, was awake and was seeing things and was talking about things in a way that was profound and compelling. But he was not the guy leading the nation. He was the guy hoping for work, hanging out at Home Depot, hoping for some kind of work. That's who Jesus looked like. If there's a picture right now, somebody who just hopes to make enough money to put food on the table for the day. And so knowing that he was speaking from a place of oppression and powerlessness, that's what he instructed his listeners to do. And in the Sermon on the Mount, that's his most famous teaching. And I think it was his stump speech. I think he was on a campaign for 1 to 3 years. And I think he probably told this thing over and over and expanded on it, like a weekend seminar type thing, if you will. And part of that was, what does nonviolent resistance look like? Knowing that if they chose the way of violence, it would only result in more violence. But Jesus was all about bringing shalom into the world, which is a reflection of the nature of God. Shalom is this Jewish word for peace, but it's way deeper than just the absence of conflict. Shalom is this deep harmony, this wholeness, wellness in ourselves, in relationship with each other, between people and other cultures, between people and creation itself. I mean, it is this all-encompassing word that means harmony, all working together. And that is the number one thing that actually salvation is about. We've made it this afterlife thing when it's really meant to be getting on board with the Jesus campaign of bringing more shalom into the world. And the stump speech was all about that. And this is one thing I've been saying the last few weeks. The only way you get to shalom is with shalom. So you can't violently bring about that kind of peace. You can quell conflict for a while. So you can call federal agents in to calm down a protest, but that's not shalom. That's momentary peace. And you're probably going to be asking for trouble if you try to do that, because violence begets violence, but shalom begets shalom. And that Jesus's whole thing was, how do we bring more of that kind of harmony, wholeness, wellness into the world? And what does that look like? And that was very dangerous, because when he would speak about such things, he was challenging power in the religious establishment. So the Jewish leaders in Jerusalem, they hated it. They knew what he was saying. He was calling them out. That's why they worked to orchestrate his death. The Roman government knew about it because he was borrowing their own words to talk about a different kind of peace. There was what Rome talked about, the Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, which was a peace of absence of conflict by military oppression. But Jesus was saying, I come to bring peace. I come to bring in good news that is really good news for all people. And so that's kind of what we're unpacking right now, is what does that look like? And some of the things that Jesus instructed are just so provocative. Like there's this one thing about, if I can expand just a touch, just a couple examples, where he talks about, okay, so if you're brought to court and somebody wants to sue the shirt off your back, and then Jesus says, well, don't just give them your shirt, but give them your jacket too. Well, back in that day and age, if you're being sued for literally the shirt off your back, it was kind of like an undershirt, nightshirt kind of thing, a long shirt that you would wear. That meant that was the last thing you had. You couldn't be sued for your coat because everybody recognized you needed something to keep warm at night. So you weren't allowed to steal that. But if some jerk came along and said, I'm going to steal the shirt off your back, the nonviolent approach to the jerk, to the prick, if you will, is to, in the court of law, while the sentence is coming down, you totally disrobe. And what that does, it makes everybody really uncomfortable. And the guy who is the prick, it calls him out for the injustice that he is carrying out. Makes everybody awkward, uncomfortable. And I related that to the Colin Kaepernick moment of kneeling during the national anthem. Kaepernick wasn't defaming the flag. He was making a statement. He was shining a spotlight that we've got an issue in our country that has not been addressed and absolutely needs to be addressed. So that was an example. He did another thing about, you know, if a soldier asks you to carry their gear for a mile, go an extra mile. And we generally read that, we're like, oh, okay, be a nice person, just do a little extra. But that was a provocative issue, because back then, a Roman soldier could only allow you to carry or force you to carry the gear for 1 mile. And if he forced you to carry it for more than that, he would get in trouble from his CO. So if you're a Jewish guy like Jesus and you're forced to carry, the CO finds about that, finds out about that, it's going to come back on that guy. So the picture that's painted is, now you have a power shift where the one with no power all of a sudden is being begged by the one who has the power to
Give it up.
change their mind. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
It is brilliant. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
my
even-
gosh, I'm
even,
totally sucked in.
Even turn the other cheek is another one where we totally take that as a doormat thing, and that's not it at all. The turn the other cheek in that context in the first century is one of the most insulting things you could do to somebody publicly, is to backhand them on, say, their right cheek, and you would use the back of your hand. It was more of a slap. What Jesus is saying, and by the way, if you did that to an equal back in the first century, you would be fined twice as much for that slap on the cheek as if you punched somebody in the nose. It's because it was such a social statement of shame and power over somebody else. You could only backhand somebody like that and get away with it if they were a slave or a woman. And so when Jesus says turn the other cheek, he's not saying take a beating. He's saying stand your ground and make the person punch you if that is necessary, because that would then demand equality on the part of the oppressor. And it would make the oppressor feel incredibly awkward in that moment. So again, it's shining a light on the oppression that is right there, so that everybody can see there's more shalom needed here. There's a people that are being oppressed. So anyway, that's some of the fun stuff that's there. It's been right in front of our noses all along, and a lot of us didn't even know it was there, and it's really provocative.
It is very provocative, and I'm so glad that you're, bringing it to light. I mean, I think it's great fodder for continued conversation, because people don't understand, right? They've taken the easy kind of surface definition of things and, misconstrued it to fit whatever their need is for that moment. But what you're saying is, it is about finding your voice and standing strong. I do have a question. I know we only have a little bit of time left, but one of the things that I know people who are around you and us will say is, God has pricked me, right? God has led me to these horrible outcomes, or, God is being the prick. He's not taking care of me. And I guess my question to you, being in the position that you're in, how do you respond to the individuals who come at you from that perspective, who are in that crisis of faith?
I have a different way of understanding, and I'm not the only one, but I have a different way of understanding God's action in the world. So generally, what's behind that God did this to me is an idea that God is ultimately, at the end of the day, sovereign, in the sense that God controls the chess pieces on the board, and everything that happens for a reason that God knows. And that's just one way of thinking about what God is, who God is, and how God acts in the world. There's a whole other way to think about. And actually, I featured a guy who is a modern teller of this way. He wrote a book called God Can't. And it challenges the notion that God is in control in that kind of a way. And so one of the things that helps a lot of people who feel like that something has happened to them, and it's either God made it happen or God didn't step in to prevent it from happening. That's usually one of those two things of what comes at it. And if they understand that there's a different way of thinking about who God is in the world, sometimes that changes everything. I had a conversation several years ago with a person that was facing a serious battle with cancer. And she came in and was just stuck on the very thing that you're talking about. Just why God are you doing this to me? And she'd had some other, tragic things happen in her life. And just to say to her, give her a different view, just to open up the thinking on this, to say, I don't think God is doing this to you. I don't think God is responsible for this. I don't think God is forcing this. I don't think God is allowing this. There's a different way to think. And I'm absolutely confident that God is actually with you in this, to shoulder you, to let you be mad at if necessary, if that helps, but to give you strength where you didn't know you needed it. And these kinds of things, I think that generally is very freeing to people. But it's tough because the cultural language that we use, even casually, still has the big guy upstairs that's basically making everything happen. But there's some problems with that theology. And this guy named Tom Oord, he's the author of the book God Can't, and the precursor to that book, which is more of an academic theological book, is called The Unconditional Love of God, or The Uncontrolling Love of God. That's it. It's an excellent book, and he basically says you have two different ways to go with God, and one of these, they're going to take you in very different directions, and both have their challenges in our thinking. One way is that classic view of sovereignty, which is God is absolutely in charge in every possible way, and therefore God's either causing things to happen or allowing things to happen, which is sort of the same thing. Right. That means that power is at the top of the list in terms of the attributes of God. But what Oord says is love is the top attribute of God. And if unconditional, uncontrolling love is at the top of the list, that means that the way God reacts with all of creation is very, very different than the chess master. That actually it's a much more collaborative, cooperative adventure and a venture between humanity and God. And that makes so much more sense. I mean, that's what's pictured in the old Jewish story of creation, right? He creates everything to work together, and he tells the people, okay, go steward the land, go take care of this thing. We're in this together. That's sort of the idea of it. Doesn't mean that God's causing all the crap to happen. And God is not the prick. Life is challenging. But once we let go of that notion, a lot of really cool things come online that make a lot of sense and make faith. There's an element of faith where it is exactly what it says. It's believing in the evidence of things unseen, right? Mm-hmm. But there's a whole lot of things we've added to faith I don't think are supposed to be there, and bad theology is a part of that. Let's get to good theology that makes sense, that really looks like what in our tradition, what Jesus was trying to get at, and is echoed by Buddha for sure, and other traditions as well. Let's embrace that and let faith have its place, but let's not create obstacles for God because of our bad theology and bad academics. So that's kind of where I come at it.
I love that because I'm all about part of my personal philosophy and passion is in removing obstacles to us being able to move forward and to reach out and be a part of, a collective humanity, right? We're all equal. We've all come together under, whichever power it is that you believe in. We're all a part of one another in that way. I recently was working with a team of individuals who were talking about how to manage your workforce in healthcare in specifics. And one of the chief nursing officers said that, he has employed the concept of love in treating everyone, your peers and, your patients with loving kindness. And the dog is like yelling in the background because his dad just came home. So let him go because he'll keep going with it. There we go. Love you too. All right.
Well, actually, that touches on one more part of that campaign speech, which Jesus says, this is another, it's a subtly subversive thing that he says, but he changes, he's the first one who said it this way, where he said, everybody knows to love those who you love. But he goes on and says, love your enemies.
Yeah.
And what he's saying with that, he's not saying, again, be a doormat and just forget that things happened and forget about justice and accountability. That's not what he's saying. What he's getting at there is you decide who you're going to be based on the shalom of God, not dictated by the pricks that are pricking you. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And that's, I think about John Lewis, and I've referenced him a couple of times over the last few months. And, in one of his interviews from a couple years ago, he was talking about the hope that he had. This kind of gets back to one of the things you were talking about earlier. And he was talking about that you just have to have hope, and that he didn't hold grudges with those who'd hurt him. And I think it's because he understood this principle of we can choose to love our enemies, which is not go give the axe murderer a hug, and maybe offer to sharpen their axe, but it's really to say, I'm gonna be who I am, and I'm not gonna give in to your hatred. I'm gonna be a person of shalom, no matter what, and gonna treat other people with humanity and dignity, even if they're treating me like crap. And that's powerful. That is crazily subversive, because you're not allowing somebody else to dictate how you are. You're walking to the beat of a different drummer. And that's a beautiful thing.
It is an absolutely beautiful thing. And that's also something that I profess in my own teaching, is that we each have the power and the opportunity every day to lead by example. We are the leaders in our own life. We can be the leaders within our community, and it's really just that off of the example of our actions and our words every single day. And so I just think that is an absolutely beautiful sentiment, and it's a great place to end. Unfortunately, I mean, our time is up. I keep on talking to you for hours, so we'll have to invite you back if you'd be willing. Oh my goodness, this has just been such an amazing conversation.
A lot of fun. Yeah, I love this kind of stuff. So thank you for your work and bringing this into the world and getting people thinking about it. And I'm sure it's bringing a lot of healing in ways that you guys don't even know. So way to go to you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you
very
so
much.
We
are certainly trying.
We are trying. We're doing. We're putting our foot
yes.
forward and just moving. And that's what we do. We don't try.
That's right. We do.
That's right.
Really quickly, I didn't mention Taisha joined us again. She says, great day, Kim and Kevin.
Oh, wonderful. We have some really nice followers. They're just amazing people who've also actually been on the show. And it's just nice because we are building this community, and that's what it's about, right? Creating that energy that moves us all forward in a positive way. With that positive light and energy. So thank you again. We really appreciate it. And we'll be talking again soon, I'm sure. It won't be the last time we'll have this conversation. So Kevin, any party words?
Pete, just really thank you very, very much. This is awesome. I hope to see you in person very soon. And for all of you who tuned in or are going to tune in, thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you again next week.
All right. Be safe, be well.
And shalom, y'all.
Shalom.